In this next session, we're going to be looking at user journeys and mapping out the user flow. So for this, you'll need pen, paper. If you have stickies, that's great, but it's not necessary. But having that tactile sticky note paper where you can move things around is really, really good. So just to recap, what we want to write down is our challenge and our deliverable. So if you're following along exactly as I'm doing, then you can write these down or maybe iterate on the challenge and deliverable. If you're actually designing something completely different, that's fine, so long as we're following through the same process. So if we want to write down the challenge, is we want to design a delightful coffee ordering system that lets users order on the go. And the deliverable is a prototype that allows users to order coffee and choose a delivery location. So we have an inspiring challenge and we have a very specific deliverable of what it is that we want to create. Next, we want to talk about the metrics. So remember the goal. The goal is to allow users to order coffee. That's the key thing here. Next, how do we know that we fulfilled that goal? It's the signal. A user selects coffee and orders it. And finally, the metric. When we're testing with users with our prototype, how do we know we're successful? Well, the number of completed orders. If all of the users that we test with complete the orders, then we know that the prototype works and that the flow is successful. So we want to map out the user journey. We've looked at our challenge, our deliverable, and our metrics. Now we need to see what the flow is. So I'm thinking, as this is a coffee ordering system, what kind of things can we take inspiration from in the real world? So we have coffee machines. So this will be like, if we were to be inspired by a coffee machine style flow, then how would we do that? Well, the user opens up their phone and they open up the app. What's the first thing you do in a coffee machine? Well, you make a payment. Because remember, you put a coin in, or maybe a credit card or debit card. That's the first thing you do before the machine will accept anything, right? Next, a user chooses the coffee that they want. So maybe it's a cappuccino, maybe a latte. The next thing they do is they customize the coffee. So perhaps they will add milk, sugar, extra cream or whatever in the actual flow. The next step would be they choose their location. You've customized your coffee. You're choosing where do you want it to be delivered. Do you want it to be delivered where you are? Do you want it to be delivered somewhere else? Perhaps. And then you order the actual coffee. The way to think about this is every time you write something down on a sticky note piece of paper, it's like a step in the flow. So the first part would be one part of the interface. So you maybe like make a payment could be a really big prominent button. Someone taps it, they add their credit card details, and then they can go on to order things. So when you're actually designing the UI, you can look at this as like a high level overview of the steps and flows that you can take. Now, this is a coffee machine style. It doesn't actually feel particularly right. But still, having this idea on the board just for as a starting point can help us get our brain going and help us think about all the different ways that we could tackle this same problem. So now we want to look at a simple order flow. So how would you buy something on an e-commerce site and use that as inspiration? We've looked at a coffee machine. Let's see other ways of doing this. So user opens a coffee menu. User customizes the coffee that they've chosen. They might add something to the cart in the same way you would on an e-commerce site. You choose your location and then you make a payment. Now this is very similar and very standard when you're actually buying something online. It still doesn't feel right. There's still things I think we could possibly flip or maybe make something a bit more interesting. And inspiration that I'm taking from, I suppose, is like ride sharing apps like My Taxi, Uber, Lyft, etc. So let's flip the actual experience. The way I'd like to design this is the first thing a user does is select their location. Why? Well, imagine if you're walking to the bus stop. You may want the coffee to be delivered at the bus stop because you know it's going to take you 10 minutes to walk there. If I select my location of where I want it to be delivered, then that's like a starting point. Because I might be on the go. I don't want to be sitting around waiting for the coffee to find me. I'd rather it go to a specific place. The next, I might choose the coffee from the actual menu. So what is it that I want? A latte, a cappuccino, whatever. Next, I want to customize it. So do I want more milk, less milk? I want it hot? Do I want it a bit cold? Do I want ice in it, etc., etc.? Then I want to choose the payment method. So I'm actually selecting how I want to pay for this. I might have multiple cards. I might have one. I might want to pay as soon as the delivery person comes along. Then I order the actual coffee and then I get a confirmation. So this is much more of a complete user journey. Remember, the confirmation is quite important because this is like the feedback to the user. Now, up until now, I've spoken about feedback from a UI perspective, but there are many different ways of actually responding to the user and reassuring them that what they've done has actually gone through. So a thank you note, a confirmation is really important in this case. So if you want to write that same flow down, then by all means do, so you can pause the video at this point. Or if you want to actually reiterate on this again, maybe you think there'll be a better flow, then please by all means do that. This course is really about you thinking through the process and using them as tools at every single step of the way. So to recap, we want to review our metrics and our challenges and everything that we've been doing up until now to make sure that we're actually fulfilling the things that we said we were going to fulfill. We want to think about the steps that a user takes and try out many different ones. Don't just go with the first thing that comes to mind, because that may not be the correct thing for your product or for your users. Map out the flow and iterate. So this is why sticky notes are really great, because you can move things around. There may be different steps that you think actually are really important. So the checkout, the order, the confirmation, but the way the user gets there, you may want to change around, and that's perfectly fine. You want to iterate the flow as much as possible now, because the moment you start drawing and actually creating UI, you start committing to the designs, and it's really hard to take a step back once you get to that point, because you've committed to doing work, and it's hard to throw it away afterwards, although we should always iterate whenever we're designing. So review your stuff, iterate on the flow. By all means, if you would like to iterate more on the flow that I've presented, that's perfectly fine. Again, it's all about the process and all the steps that you can take to create a great user experience for your users.